And next, I wanted to bring up this issue of evolution. So I wanted to bring up this paper because it's kind of a nice framework for thinking about the interventions of events or disruptions in a system. But there's also this interesting connotation that um, interventions are these one-off things, like events have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end, and the event has ended. And of course, the authors probably think about this quite more deeply, but this is sort of the um, pace that you often get when these interventions are discussed, and it's partly because, of course, the funding for research projects and all kinds of social programs usually has a beginning and middle and an end. uh, but when we think about the most complex problems in the society, what we really need is a continuous process, something where instead of someone, a consultant, flying in and then flying out, and then forgetting about the whole thing, and maybe some of his wise teachings are left to the system and maybe not. But what we need is something where we gradually replace the parts of the old system or the old functioning with a new functioning, with a selection process where individuals can pick up the things that they find more useful, given everything that they know about their environment. Remember, I mentioned how we might view individuals as the self-determined experts of their own environments. So, in this view, also it's different to have an iteration that's serial compared to a parallel one. So in a serial iteration, you have one product or one thing that you put to the real world test, and then you find out it has these kinds of weaknesses, and then you fix them, and then you put it back, and then you figure out more of these weaknesses and how it should be improved, and then you put it back, and so forth, and that's how you iterate it. But how evolution and what we need for the most complex problems in the society is that we need these parallel processes which is actually super inefficient in a complicated context. But in a complex context, what works in complicated context doesn't work anymore. So we don't have that much of a choice. So what we need is the multiple components or products which sort of have this competitive quality to them, so that the users can select the products the versions that they like, or the pieces that they consider useful for them. And in this very nice review, the authors present this example of sports competition and collaboration. So you have this on the bottom right, you have this competition between players. So individual players compete with each other to score points. But then the players collaborate in order to enable the teams to compete. And as the teams compete, this provides a selection mechanism for the choosing the players who can actually collaborate with others. And in the same way, then these teams compete. But within the sports organization, they collaborate. So, for example, basketball and baseball might compete with each other for spectators, and this competition provides an incentive for people to keep it interesting, to not break the rules, and so forth, and to also produce this sort of a selection mechanism where the best teams are, well, maybe not the best, but at least the most fit for the situation teams are selected, and collaboration is strengthened. And in a social setting, you might go think of something like this. So you have sort of an identity in two levels. So you would have so a person might feel that they are part of a community, and these communities have this sort of a collaborative rivalry going on. But individuals also have this identity as the socialized joint identity as the society, which makes them helps them collaborate effectively um, uh, within the communities. And this sort of the collaborative rivalry produces this sort of diversity that then gets picked up on the societal level. And in the same way, you could have the communities strengthen the social identity and produce this sort of identity structure in order to allow this collaborative rivalry between teams of people. So let's say there are these 3 to 15 person teams who try to improve their own uh, uh, livelihoods. And in this sense, they compete with other teams, but also benefit the community and want to be acting as to the best interests of the community they're part of. And this again produces this variety and selection dynamic. And in exactly the same way, then these individuals could have this sort of collaborative rivalry within the teams against each other, but they have this on the other hand, the social identity as a team helps them work together to produce a joint effort against the other teams. And just one last thing about the tipping points in social cultural change. We already mentioned this once, but I wanted to bring it up again because it can be very counterintuitive. So here I have the percentage of people reporting they wear masks in public spaces in Finland. And so I have the actual observed data here, and then a dotted line here that sort of depict what would have what you might have thought if you would have thought that the future will be just like the past here. And many health officials actually did think this, and they were surprised that people were actually able to change their behaviors en masse and start to take up this masking behavior. And sort of, so if you remember, we talked about the differences between the map and the terrain and the simplifications and the models. So this gap is sort of the gap that's produced when you're using the wrong mental model for this situation. And curiously enough, there's the dotted line around 25% where you see that it really started taking off. So there's this one article by Damon Santola who where they did something completely different, but they had a predicted for that case they predicted 24% of the population as a critical mass, and I just thought to bring it up because it's funny. It corresponds nicely to where that curve takes off. And just to finish, there are sort of so there's this idea that small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, and it doesn't need the majority to take up an idea. It only needs the dedicated minority. And this is also something that Scott E. Page mentions, that also subtle change needs is a few angry people and a lot of positive feedback loops. So like amplifying feedback loops he's talking about. And that's why he recommended that whenever you're dealing with a social system, you keep an eye on the tail and keep an eye on the changes that can happen, and do not just fall into the stupor of thinking that the situation has been stable, so it will remain such in the future too.